Welcome to Testaments of Faith, Joshua. The Conquest of the Promised Land, Courage, Faith, and Miracles, Chapter 1. The Call of a New Leader. The dust still hung over the camp as the mourning for the great Moses echoed through the tents. Israel was left without its leader, but not without its promise. Joshua, son of Nun, knelt, feeling the weight of the mantle that had been placed upon him. The silence of the tent was broken by a voice not from the earth, but from heaven. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now rise and lead these people into the land I have promised them. Joshua's heart pounded like a war drum. The challenge was immense, but the promise was greater. Every place where the sole of your foot treads, I will give to you. The divine voice continued, filled with power and comfort. No one will be able to stand against you. Be strong and courageous. Do not turn from my law. Meditate on it day and night. These words were both a shield for Joshua's soul and a sword in his hand. God was not only commanding the conquest of the land, but also the conquest of fear. When Joshua opened his eyes, he felt something new. Not just the weight of responsibility, but the fire of authority. The time to follow was over. It was time to lead. As he stepped out of the tent, his gaze met the eyes of the people. Men, women, and children awaited his word, and he did not hesitate. Prepare your provisions. In 3 days, we will cross the Jordan. The people with one voice responded, just as we obeyed Moses, we will obey you. There, under the starry sky, the transition was complete. The servant had become the commander. But the land flowing with milk and honey was still beyond the river, guarded by walls and armies. The stage was set for a battle where victory would not come by the sword, but by faith. Chapter 2. The Spies in Jericho, the Scarlet Thread of Salvation. Night cloaked Jericho with its dark mantle as 2 stealthy men slipped through the city's shadows. They were spies sent by Joshua, and their hearts pounded like war drums. The streets buzzed with footsteps and voices, for Israel's fame had already breached the city walls. Seeking refuge, they found shelter in a humble house, where a woman watched them with keen and mysterious eyes. Her name was Rahab. Her past was stained with shame, but her spirit carried something rare in Jericho, fear of the God of Israel. When soldiers pounded on her door demanding the spies, Rahab hid them under stalks of flax on her rooftop. Holding her breath, she waited until the soldiers' footsteps faded into the night. Descending the stairs, Rahab faced the spies. Yet her voice was not hostile. It was filled with faith. I know that the Lord has given you this land. We have heard how he dried up the Red Sea and destroyed kings before you. Our people are terrified because your God is God in heaven above and on earth below. Her words were both a confession and a plea. Swear to me by the Lord that you will spare my family. Moved by her sincerity, the spies vowed, our lives for yours if you do not betray us. Tie this scarlet cord to your window, and all within your house will be spared. The pact was sealed, not with gold or parchment, but with faith and a crimson thread. Under the cover of night, Rahab lowered the spies down the city wall with a rope, her heart swinging between fear and hope. Before departing, the men instructed, hide in the hills for 3 days until the pursuers give up. From afar, they glimpsed the window marked by the scarlet thread, a simple yet powerful symbol of salvation through faith. Returning to the camp, their eyes gleamed as they reported to Joshua, the whole land trembles in fear before us. But beyond military strategy, they carried certainty. The God of Israel was already working within the enemy's walls. Chapter 3. Crossing the Jordan, the miracle that marks history. Dawn painted the sky with golden hues as the command echoed through the camp. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. The Jordan River, swollen by the spring floods, roared like a living serpent, blocking the path to the promised land. The people's eyes reflected both anxiety and hope, for before them stood the impossible. Yet Joshua, steadfast as a rock, raised his voice. When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, follow it. For the Lord will open a way where there is no path. Silence settled, heavy with anticipation, as the priests lifted the ark, the symbol of the living God's presence. Their destiny was sealed. They would not prevail by strength, but by faith. The first feet touched the Jordan's edge, and then the miracle unfolded before their astonished eyes. The waters, as if subdued by invisible hands, halted miles away, rising like a crystalline wall. The riverbed, once treacherous, turned into dry ground. An invisible bridge opened, and the people advanced, each step echoing not just through the earth, but through eternity. Children's eyes sparkled, mothers wept, and warriors marched with reverence and joy. The miracle was not merely a passage. It was a testimony that the God who had parted the Red Sea was still with them, generation after generation. When the last Israelite crossed, Joshua gave a command. Choose 12 men, one from each tribe, and take 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan. Under the sky that had witnessed the impossible, they built a memorial of stones, simple in form, but eternal in meaning. And when the priests carrying the ark stepped onto the far bank, the waters thundered back into their course. The sound was deafening, but the echo of the miracle would never fade. There, in the shadow of 12 stones, the people knew that it was not Joshua leading them, but the God who turns the impossible into a path. Chapter 4. The Fall of Jericho, Victory Through Obedience. The sun rose on the horizon as Joshua lifted his eyes to see the imposing city of Jericho, surrounded by walls that seemed to touch the sky. Its towers stood as colossal sentinels of stone, and its gates were iron fortresses. Humanly speaking, it was invincible. But the battle to be fought there would not be won by swords, but by faith and obedience. Amid the silence, a heavenly figure appeared before Joshua, sword drawn. Trembling, the leader asked, "Are you for us or for our enemies?" The figure replied, "Neither. I am the commander of the Lord's army." With reverence filling his heart, Joshua fell face down. "What message does my Lord have for his servant?" And the strategy was revealed. March around the city once a day for 6 days. On the 7th day, march 7 times. At the sound of the trumpets, shout loudly, and the walls will collapse. For 6 days, the sound of footsteps echoed around Jericho. No shouts, no attacks, only the sacred silence of obedience and the solemn sound of priestly trumpets. Inside, Jericho's soldiers mocked the insane strategy. But the real siege was unseen. It was spiritual. On the 7th day, with the sun still young, the people rose and marched 7 times. With each lap, tension mounted like a storm ready to break. Then the trumpets sounded, long and deep, and Joshua's voice shattered the silence. "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." And then, the ground trembled, and the walls crumbled into dust. The impossible fell before faith. The people surged forward, and Jericho, the mighty fortress, collapsed without a single stone touched by human hands, except the hands of God. Yet amidst the destruction, one house stood untouched, Rahab's house, marked by the scarlet thread of promise. The spies kept their word, rescuing her and her family. Thus, a woman once forgotten by society entered the lineage of the Savior. That day, Israel learned that walls may be mighty, but obedience to God's voice is mightier. Chapter 5. The Defeat at Ai. The Price of Hidden Sin. The dust of victory at Jericho still lingered when Joshua turned his eyes to the next city, Ai, smaller and seemingly defenseless. Confident, he sent spies who returned saying, "We do not need the entire army. 2,000 or 3,000 men are enough." Without seeking God's guidance, Joshua gave the order. But when the warriors advanced, the unthinkable happened. Ai defeated them, and 36 Israelites fell in shameful retreat. The cry of defeat pierced the air, and terror spread through the camp. In despair, Joshua tore his clothes, fell before the ark, and cried out, "Lord, Why did you bring us here to be destroyed? The earth's silence was broken by heaven's response. Stand up. Israel has sinned. Someone has taken what was devoted to me and hidden it. That is why you were defeated. At dawn, Joshua summoned all the tribes before the Lord. One by one, the clans passed until the unseen hand of justice stopped over Achan's family from the tribe of Judah. Pale and trembling, Achan was brought before Joshua, and the truth spilled from his lips. I have sinned against the Lord. I saw a Babylonian robe, silver, and gold, and I hid them under my tent. But his confession came too late. Joshua sent men to Achan's tent, and there lay the stolen treasures, gleaming with guilt's weight. Sin, born from a glance, ended in disgrace. With a heavy heart, Joshua declared judgment. Achan, you have brought trouble on Israel. Today the Lord will bring trouble on you. Under a clouded sky, Achan and all he owned were brought to the valley of Achor. With stones, the people erased his transgression from the land, raising over him a pile of stones, a grim memorial of the cost of disobedience. Only after this cleansing did the Lord's favor return to Israel. Now, with hearts aligned and sin removed, Joshua led a new attack on Ai, this time under divine strategy. An ambush was set, and the city that once humiliated them was captured and destroyed. Israel learned that victory does not come from strength, but from holiness. The greatest enemy is not before us, but hidden within us. Chapter 6. The sun stands still over Gibeon, the miracle that defies time. The sun had barely risen when a breathless messenger arrived at Joshua's camp. The Gibeonites are under attack. 5 Amorite kings have surrounded them. They plead for help. The Gibeonites, who had made a covenant with Israel, now faced the wrath of a coalition of enemies. Without hesitation, Joshua gathered his warriors. As they prepared for battle, a voice from heaven declared, "Do not fear them, for I have delivered them into your hands. Not one of them will stand against you." With faith burning in his heart, Joshua commanded a night march of nearly 40 kilometers, a race against time. Under the cover of darkness, the army's footsteps echoed like distant thunder, and Joshua's eyes remained fixed on one goal, the victory given by God. At dawn, the battlefield was revealed, and Israel's war cry shattered the morning silence like a thunderclap. The Amorites, caught by surprise, fled in terror, but the hand of God was already upon them. Then the sky became a weapon. The Lord hurled large hailstones from heaven, striking down more enemies than the swords of Israel. The battlefield turned into a stage of divine judgment, where God fought alongside his people. But as the sun began to set, Joshua saw that the battle needed to be finished. In a moment of supernatural faith, he looked to the heavens and commanded, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon, over the valley of Ajalon." The impossible happened. The sun halted, and the day prolonged itself as the enemy was annihilated. Never before or since has there been a day like that, when the Lord obeyed the voice of a man. The victory was complete. But the 5 enemy kings had hidden in a cave at Makkedah. Joshua ordered, "Seal the entrance with stones and guard them." After the enemy army was vanquished, Joshua brought the kings before the people. With authority, he declared, "Place your feet on the necks of these kings, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies." And with a final blow, God's justice was sealed. Israel learned that when we march under God's promise, even time obeys faith. Chapter 7. The Conquest of Canaan, the fulfillment of the promise. Battles multiplied, and Joshua's name echoed like thunder throughout Canaan. Fear spread among the kings who watched cities fall one after another. But Joshua knew, the victory was not his, but the Lord of hosts, who fought for Israel. Under divine guidance, he led a series of military campaigns, conquering cities in the north and south one by one, with the strength of a man fulfilling a promise made centuries earlier to Abraham. Hazor, the largest and most powerful city, was reduced to ashes, and with it, the last great stronghold of resistance in Canaan. The land flowing with milk and honey was conquered, but the mission was not complete. It was time to divide the inheritance. Under a clear sky, Joshua gathered the tribes at Shiloh, before the tent of meeting. There, sacred stones were cast, and the land was distributed according to God's command. Judah received mountains and valleys, while Ephraim and Manasseh occupied fertile hills. To the old warrior Caleb, Joshua gave Hebron, as God had promised. Caleb, at 85 years old, declared with fire in his eyes, "Today I am still as strong as ever to conquer mountains and drive out giants." He climbed and seized Hebron, proving that faith knows no age and promises never lose their power. Yet some tribes failed to drive out the enemies, planting seeds of trouble for the future. When the dust of battle settled, the land was at peace. The clangor of swords gave way to laughter, songs, and celebrations. Old and weathered, Joshua looked upon the land beneath his feet and saw not just territory, but a living promise. As God had said, not one of his words had failed. Every mountain, river, and valley was now under the banner of the chosen people. Yet Joshua knew, Israel's greatest enemy was not external but internal, disobedience. His heart prepared one final message, an eternal echo for future generations. Chapter 8. Joshua's final address. Choose whom you will serve. Time had carved wrinkles into Joshua's face, but his spirit remained as steadfast as the rocks of Shechem, where he now gathered all the people. The leader who had crossed dry rivers and brought down walls through faith was about to deliver his final message. Before the tribes of Israel, he raised his voice like a serene thunder. You yourselves have seen all that the Lord has done for you. He fought not with swords, but with his mighty hand. He gave you cities you did not build and vineyards you did not plant. The silent crowd felt the weight of truth pressing on their hearts. Then Joshua's tone hardened, like a father correcting his children. Throw away the foreign gods among you and yield your hearts to the Lord. The message was clear. The battle of swords was over, but the battle of the heart was just beginning. Then Joshua issued a challenge that would echo through the ages. If it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, the gods your ancestors served or the gods of the Amorites. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. The weight of choice fell upon the people like a storm of conviction. Eyes met, hearts pounded, and then the response burst forth in unison. We too will serve the Lord, for he is our God. But Joshua, with a piercing gaze, replied, You cannot serve the Lord, for he is holy. If you forsake him, he will bring judgment upon you. With fervor, the people reaffirmed, No, we will serve the Lord. Before them all, Joshua raised a large stone beneath the oak at Shechem, marking it as a witness to their covenant. This stone has heard your words. It will stand as a witness against you if you ever deny your God. The wind whispered through the leaves as if heaven itself recorded the pact. With this act, Joshua sealed not just a commitment, but an eternal warning. Faith is not inherited, it is chosen. The people departed to their inheritances, but the words of that day echoed in their souls, a timeless call to remain faithful, not only in war but in peace, where the greatest enemy is forgetfulness. Chapter 9. The Death of Joshua. The Legacy of a Life of Faith. A gentle breeze swept through the hills of Timnath-Serah, carrying the scent of olive trees as Joshua, his eyes weary from time, gazed upon the land he had helped conquer. His battle-scarred hands now rested in calmness. The man who had seen the Jordan part, Jericho's walls crumble, and the sun stand still over Gibeon now felt his final battle approaching, not against armies, but against time. With a calm voice, he gathered his family, and the memories of his journey shone through his words. I served the Lord in war, and now I serve him in peace. Remember, the greatest triumph is not conquering lands, but keeping your heart faithful to God. His eyes, still resolute, were filled not with fear, but with certainty. As the sun set, Joshua closed his eyes and departed to eternal rest at the age of 110, a life fully lived. Yet, the echo of his existence was not buried with him. On the contrary, it lived on through the testimony of his victories and the covenant he established at Shechem. Israel, touched by the legacy of a man who never wavered before the impossible, remained faithful to the Lord as long as the elders who had served with Joshua lived. There, in Timnath-Serah, on the land he had seized through faith, he was laid to rest. But his tomb was more than a grave. It was a monument to fulfilled promises, to a servant who fought, believed, and gave his final breath to the God who never fails. Nearby also rested the bones of Joseph, brought from Egypt as he had wished, a generation united by faith in a God who keeps his promises. Time passed, the sounds of battle faded, but Joshua's legacy became eternal. For a name is not built on victories alone, but on obedience. As future generations recounted his deeds, one truth echoed like a gentle thunder. A man with faith in God can not only tear down walls but build bridges to eternity. Thus, Joshua's story did not end in his tomb, but lives on to this day, not only in books but in hearts that choose to say, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." The life of Joshua teaches us that true conquest is not of the land, but of the heart. His victories were born of obedience, his strength came from faith, and his legacy endures because he chose to serve the Lord until the end. And you? Faced with life's walls and unseen battles, whom will you serve? The answer is not only in your words but in your life. For the greatest memorial we can leave is a life of faithfulness to God. Like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more content. Stay with God, and until next time on Testaments of Faith. Thank you.